hellhounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hellhounds, ghosts, demons are coming, spirits, ghosts.
Welcome home, my little hellhounds. Tonight we have 6 scary stories to sink our hellish teeth into. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares. Also, if you like this content, then don't forget to subscribe. And if you would be so kind and click that like button, it really helps the channel. Now, let's get right into it. Easter break changed my daughter forever. Posted by MTP6921. Having our only daughter when both my wife and I were close to 40 years old has its advantages, like being financially stable, where we could just take her to the Florida Keys for her 6th grade Easter break. We actually flew down to Miami and stayed a night at one of the 1940s Art Deco hotels, the Clevelander, which was located right by the ocean and unfortunately also right by the Spring Breakers posing as college students. I regret having my young daughter exposed to the synthetic marijuana smoke and whatever else those people were exhaling. My wife and I did our best trying to entertain our daughter, but between the effects she was experiencing from the chemicals she had inhaled and the fact that she had to hang out with her parents, who were close to 60 years old, we could tell that she was miserable and we were failing her as parents. We hoped the car ride to the Florida Keys would brighten up all of our spirits tomorrow, so we went to bed in Miami with high hopes. We all got up the next morning, and the one good thing that the chemicals we all involuntarily inhaled the previous day did was make us all lightheaded and sleep more than we normally would. We were still able to get on the famous Route 1 heading south to Key West by 8 AM, and we even got some complimentary coffee and danishes from the Clevelander, which quickened our departure. The drive through the Florida Keys was a bit disappointing and did nothing more than slip my daughter deeper into her misery and depression. Listening to the Kokomo song for years about Key Largo, I was expecting some type of grandeur paradise, but in reality Key Largo was no better than the Jersey Shore or Ocean City, Maryland. We drove through the key after key, where there was very little scenery to show our daughter. Grace, besides abandoned railroad bridges that were damaged by hurricanes. But, let's face it, what does a 6th grader care about abandoned railroad tracks? After going through 30-something keys, separated by mostly short bridges spanning what seemed like nothing more than 50 feet, and one long bridge that was 7 miles long, we finally got to Key West. I hate to admit this, but being around rich people and wannabe rich people suits me so much better than being around spring break college wannabes who would constantly smoke whatever substances they could get their hands on and exhale that around my daughter. Key West had a nice charm to it, with a nice mix of homes that were built around the turn of the 19th century, but once again my daughter Grace could care less about that or Ernest Hemingway's home or even Fort Zachary Taylor, because what she was really longing for was having a friend that she could hang out with and have fun and not have to be entertained by her mom and dad, who were boring and embarrassing to her. This was our last day staying at the South End Motel, and my daughter was so depressed that my wife was starting to get depressed as well. I told Grace that if she could beat me in a lap of swimming at the local public beach, then I would give her a $200 prize. The beach was 2 blocks from our motel and was located right by the most southernmost point in the United States, where a monument was located. The $200 was a begrudgingly enough tease for Grace to come with us to the beach. We stopped off first to get a picture by the monument. Luckily, there was a young girl there, around Grace's age, who was willing to take a picture of the 3 of us, so we could show off to our friends on Facebook that we stood on the southernmost point of the United States. The girl was really friendly and outgoing, and even asked Grace if she wanted to go to the beach with her. Grace was so happy that her and the new girl named Nellie jogged to the beach, which was only a few yards away. Both my wife and I felt like our wishes were truly answered, and we just happened to be at the right place at the right time, with Nellie taking our picture. For the rest of the day, my wife and I did nothing more than just smile as Grace and Nellie played with each other as if they had been best friends their whole life. They both got to the beach at 11 AM, and besides me buying them both a hot dog at 2:30 PM, they did nothing more than chase each other around in the water and gathered seashells up until now, which is 7:30 PM. I haven't seen Nellie's parents, and we were starving, so I wasn't quite sure what to do about dinner. It was going to get dark in a few minutes, and Nellie said she lived locally in Key West, just a few blocks from our motel. She asked me if she could use my phone. That way she could call her parents and we could walk her home. This was really strange to my wife and I, but anything that kept Grace happy was a risk we were willing to take. So the 4 of us walked over to Passover Lane and Angela Street, where Nellie and Grace walked behind my wife and I. The 2 of them had a better chemistry than my wife and I did, and we have been married for 30 years. Thank goodness for my phone's flashlight, because it got so dark really quick and we could barely see anything. Nellie was fine regardless with finding her way home, and she was adamant that we didn't come to the front of her house. We respected her wishes, not knowing the exact reason, but assuming that she didn't want us to know exactly where she lived for her and her family's safety. It was so sweet to watch Grace and Nellie hug each other before Nellie walked away. The three of us walked back to our motel, and even though Grace was upset that Nellie had to go home, she seemed to be in much better state of mind. We went back to our motel and crashed for the night. My wife and I, for the first time, didn't feel like complete losers, and we didn't regret having a kid later in life, because we watched our daughter interact all day with Nellie in the most happiest ways. From being in the sun all day, the three of us had no trouble falling asleep, and we were up and ready by 9 AM the next morning, where we had about an hour to spare before we needed to go to the airport to catch our flight. Grace suggested that we go see if Nellie was outside by her house. My wife and I thought, well, why not? Because the worst thing Nellie could do is just tell us to go away. So I put Passover Lane and Angela Street back into my phone's GPS, and after packing the rental car with our suitcases, we headed back over to where we dropped Nellie off, which was less than a mile away. My daughter's eyes were glued to the car's window, searching, see if she could see Nellie. Then I noticed something that I couldn't see last night as I pulled closer to the intersection of Passover Lane and Angela Street. It was something that was really shocking and caused me to stop the car, where my wife and I just looked at each other, because where we dropped that girl off last night was actually a cemetery and not a house. There was even a long tourist trolley bus that was stopped in front of the cemetery as a tourist attraction. The odd thing was that I recalled this cemetery being on the top 20 things to see in Key West, but I didn't realise where the cemetery was located. Since we had close to an hour to spare, I parked the car and we followed the tourist off the trolley and into the cemetery. My daughter kept saying, "Dad, this can't be the same place we were last night," but my wife had accidentally dropped the spare motel key card in the street, and she was fumbling with her phone last night, and the key card was still in the same location as last night. I lied to my daughter and said, "You're right, honey, but I just want to check out this cemetery because it was on the must-see list in Key West." Grace looked upset but went into the cemetery. I was curious to hear what the tour guide had to say, but we didn't pay for the trolley tour, so we purposely stayed back to make it look like we weren't trying to steal a free show. The first grave the tour guide showed was a husband and wife murder-suicide, then followed by a set of graves where young men were killed in a dynamite explosion. As the trolley tour guide got to the third grave, the three of us looked at a bronze sculpture perched on top of a rectangular marble slab about 5 feet long by 2 feet across. The three of us might have well been on Mars, as we all stood there speechless, looking stunned at an exact replica of Nellie, who we saw all day yesterday. The tour guide started to read the backstory to the sculpture and said, "This young girl, Helen Nellie Delaney, who tragically died in 1927 when she was rescuing some of the local children from a fire that was set to the one-room schoolhouse. Unfortunately, all evidence pointed to the fire being a deliberate act, and poor Nellie died 2 weeks later of smoke inhalation, but not before saving the lives of at least 7 younger children. The 3 of us did nothing more than just stare at the statue for an hour and a half without even uttering a word to each other. We all just had multiple emotions and thoughts going through our heads, and words would do nothing but complicate the issue even more. Even when we left, we all kind of just felt we spent enough time looking at the statue, and in solidarity, all 3 of our minds didn't know how to process what had happened yesterday, so we just gave up and left the cemetery together. Luckily, the Key West airport was about the size of a Burger King, and there was no hassle going through security, and we still made our flight on time. The flight home, we sat 3 across in the same row, where Grace sat in the middle. My wife and I had no spiritual knowledge to share with Grace, since we've been telling her since she was born that we were staunch atheists. So whatever thoughts Grace had on Nellie, my wife and I just listened. We don't know the long-term effects that one day encounter with that mysterious girl will have on Grace, but it seems like after we got back from Key West, Grace has been gifted an extra sense that she didn't have prior to the trip. It just seems like she could sense bad, ominous things before they even happen, or sometimes even small trivial things, like the other day when she told me to take a different way to work when I had to drive to New York because there was an accident by Newark. The only thing was that she predicted that a half hour before the accident actually happened. Unfortunately, there were no photos taken or a phone call made by Nellie, which I assumed was because she had no idea how to use a smartphone, which made sense after the fact, as she awkwardly handled my phone, not really knowing what to do. Sleep is for the weak. Posted by Bloody Spaghetti. Fortunately, the hex had worked. I am certain of this. Unfortunately, it took me suffering a nasty fall from a racehorse for the magic to work itself. Many bones were broken, including a couple of vertebrae, and a few internal organs were ruptured. It was painful. I'm lucky the hex actually worked. I invented it myself and I was my own guinea pig. I didn't expect it to happen this early, but alas, it works, and I'd probably start making more of these. Unfortunately, the hex did not fix pre-existing damage, meaning I am riddled with scars and other superficial deformations of my dermis. Luckily, my face is intact. Moreover, I think my insomnia has gotten worse recently. If before the fall I could manage 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, now I get about an hour or 2 asleep per night. This is most definitely taken toll on my body and my mind. I am becoming increasingly more irritable. I seem to lash out at the most minute of things disproportionately. My mind won't stop racing, further exhausting my body, but my condition will not allow me proper rest. The whirlwind of thoughts seems to grow stronger as I lay down. A constant pulsating headache plagues the back of my skull. The pain became so awful at a few points that I had lost consciousness and ended up bruising myself pretty badly. The constant exhaustion has driven me to see things that aren't there, mainly ghastly dogs made up of black fire running around before vanishing into the nothingness. Another common vision is that of a tall, pallid humanoid with a massive gaping maw that stares at me from the distance. The thing seems to be naked, lacking in gender, but covered in iris-less eyes all over its lanky body. The figure tends to look like a gluttonous parody of the giant Argos Panoptes. At first, said visions scared me to no end, especially those judging, condemning eyes of that pale abomination. These eyes they used to dig deep under my skin with their sharp stare. With times I've gotten used to them after I came to realise that these are just products of a tired psyche. The worst part of my condition is the bodily exhaustion and constant inflammation of various organs. I feel like my limbs are heavy and stiff. I used to be athletic, but now I'm a lumbering mess. Even the slightest movement causes a great deal of sharp and burning pain. The skin around my scars seems to twist on itself endlessly. The subdermal neurons assaulting my brain with a barrage of pain signals. Each and every scar hurts like it has been reopened and prodded, especially on windy days. God, I hate the wind. My miserable state is reflected in my appearance. Sadly, I look pale, thin, almost skeletal. Whenever I look in the mirror, I am reminded of a man plagued by consumption. My bones protrude from under the skin, my face painfully stretched over my skull, purple lips and bleeding gums, eyes sunken and devoid of light. I think I might be developing cataracts, even though my vision is not affected yet. I look so bad that even my pet crow, Jolty, seems to look at me with concern. I can see it in his brown eyes. One of my colleagues has suggested I try drinking the red humour to get myself into better shape. I've given that a shot. I'm saddened to say that blood doesn't really restore youth. It merely leaves a sour taste in one's mouth. The solution to my problems seems to lie within the realm of dreams. I need to get properly rested. Who knew that even reanimated corpses needed to sleep to stay intact? Guys, please don't become a vegan just to impress a girl, or you'll end up in jail like me. Posted by MTP6921. There's only so much fulfillment in life I can get from working or by watching Hulu or Netflix. I just haven't been the same since my wife divorced me. It was just a total blow to my ego. Even though it's been more than 3 years, I still haven't fully recovered. She left me for someone who made more money than I did. I guess me being a chef in a mid-scale restaurant where I just couldn't compete with a high-powered attorney, which is who she left me for. A lot of times when I'm cutting onions or peppers at work, I'm doing it with such anger and vigour that I'm really just letting my frustrations out on my ex-wife. I just never pictured us getting divorced. I felt so betrayed, knowing she was seeing him behind my back. So now I live in this apartment complex on the outskirts of Philadelphia. There's 20 individual apartment units, with 19 of them being rented out. It's a nice apartment complex with its own gym and pool, and everyone's friendly, but I'm the only single oddball one, because the prices of homes in this area are so expensive. Couples have decided to just rent places like where I'm living. As I was leaving for work today, I couldn't help but notice someone moving into the last vacant apartment. It was a fairly fit woman in her mid-20s, and we just briefly exchanged pleasantries. I'm not sure how she would feel about me being 33, but I feel we are about the same age range, though I'm a few years older. I went to my job, and while I was cooking, at least, I had something to think about with the new woman moving in. I finished my shift and went home, and then went to bed. The next morning I woke up and went to the gym like I typically do in the apartment complex. I'm usually the only one there, but today I was surprised when I saw the new lady tenant there as well. She told me her name was Vivian, and we actually did very little exercising, and we did more talking than anything else. As the days went on, I saw her every day at the gym, and eventually we started hanging out at each other's apartments. I was playing off her vibes, and she was in a long-term relationship like me, and she was playing it real slow. Also, she was a very strict vegan. She wouldn't allow any type of clothing into her apartment that was made from any parts from an animal. Regardless, I liked her, and I was willing to play her game if it meant being in a relationship with her. We are now at 3 months, and I have joined her vegan lifestyle. I bought a whole new wardrobe, and I even got a chef's position at a new vegan restaurant. I had lost 30 pounds from eating healthier vegan food. The only thing that was bothering me was that we've had no physical contact, and she tends to be a bit controlling. She just likes it when my apartment is spotless. I say to her jokingly, Vivian, I don't think it's necessary to go through my kitchen cabinet like that. Then she won't pick up on my sarcasm and would say, well, maybe if you learned how to clean with bleach, then you wouldn't have all this filth. I just tuned her out because I know I'll just sink back into my old, depressed self if I'm alone again. I just haven't been able to keep any weight on. I guess I didn't realise the limitations to what a vegan can eat. I'm down to a size 29 waist, and I'm starting to look emaciated, and I feel really weak. I really don't like my new chef position because I'm really not that good at preparing vegan platters, and I keep getting food sent back to me related to customer complaints. It just seems like little by little, every little thing is starting to get me really mad. Like this must have been the third person today that complained to the owner that my gazpacho soup lacked flavour. So when I got home, I really just wanted to be left alone. But in my bedroom, I hear that knock knock on my door, where I know she knows I'm here. As I lay down in my bed with my head spinning, I really don't want to get up, but I do so anyways. I open the door and I put my pretend smile on and invite Vivian in. I bring her back to my room and she just listens to me as I swallow my pride and I vent about what a mediocre chef I am and how I've lost more weight than I can count and how I'm really just not happy. Vivian, sensing that I wasn't happy, makes a promise to me that when I get home from work tomorrow, she will make my evening worthwhile. So I try my best to pull myself out from this funk and I start to ease up a little. Eventually I come out of my room with her and we actually went for a walk outside. After the walk she goes back to her apartment and I retire to my bed. Before I go to bed I think to myself that at least I will have intercourse tomorrow night for the first time in years. Tomorrow comes and because I've lost so much weight from being a vegan, I just skip the gym. Work was downright awful, to the point where I'm certain the owner just wants me to quit so he doesn't have to fire me, which is the worst feeling in the world. I dragged myself to complete the shift, and afterwards at least I knew Vivian was going to put out tonight, so I drove back to my apartment in my beat up 2006 Hyundai Elantra, where I was really trying not to focus on work. Eventually I get to my apartment where I had given Vivian the key yesterday, and I smell an old friend that I haven't smelled in a long time, which was barbecue sauce. Thinking that she was going to make an exception tonight, I was anticipating maybe the best barbecue chicken, or better yet, maybe the best barbecue spare ribs that I haven't had in what seemed like for years. So as I come through the door, Vivian said, "Sit down honey, dinner will be ready in 30 seconds. My mouth is watering as she brings out of the oven what looks like a pork butt smothered in barbecue sauce. My stomach prepares itself for absolute bliss. Vivian starts to blabber as she brings out Brussels sprouts and other greens, which I might throw up if I have to eat again. As I take the steak knife into the succulent barbecued pork butt, I quickly realise that I have been bamboozled into the most horrible trick someone could play onto someone else, because this freaking thing was a baked watermelon with barbecue sauce smothered all over it that looked like meat but was nothing more than your goddamned seed growing watermelon. So I just sat at the dinner table thinking this bitch better be good in the sack, because I'm literally starving myself here. I try my best to eat a Brussels sprout and some corn. Then after dinner it was my responsibility to clean up this monstrosity because she cooked. After I cleaned up, I stood in the kitchen as she pointed out to me everything I didn't clean right, from the dishes to the table. I was going to lunge at her, but I stopped myself. After being completely emasculated, as I sat on the couch, I didn't say a word as the seconds turned into minutes, which turned into an hour, as she did nothing more than just blabber and blabber, but I could smell that darn barbecue sauce. Mr. Delrico, my name is Detective John Stevens from the Philadelphia Homicide Unit. Can you please tell me from the beginning how Ms. Vivian Lopez's severed upper torso was found in your bathroom tub, and how both of her legs, including her rump, were found in your oven and kitchen table? As the bright light shined down onto my face at the police station interrogation room, I responded, "Well, sir, I was protein deprived for weeks, and she just kept nagging and nagging me, and the smell of barbecue sauce lingered in the air. When she told me we weren't going to have intercourse that night, my mind shifted from romance to no longer being a vegan." My Irish dad cursed me with blonde hair. Posted by MTP6921. I am the only girl in my class that has blonde hair. Everyone else's hair is either really black or just black. My dad married a native Spaniard, and he is from Ireland. My dad was on a business trip some years ago, and I met my mother in the coastal town of Valencia, Spain. I am in 8th grade, and looking like my dad is both a blessing and a curse. For one thing, it seems like every hormonal boy is interested in me, but sometimes that extends to men that are too old for me. The girls, on the other hand, make my life miserable. Some of them don't even think my real hair colour is blonde, and that I actually dye it blonde for the attention. So I've struggled fitting in with the other girls, and for no other reason than jealousy. I talked to my mom about dyeing my hair a darker colour, and she felt I shouldn't do that to make myself look less pretty. It's almost April already, and I'm really starting to get fed up with the rest of the 11 girls in my class, so much so that I offered any of them the opportunity to fight me, which is not my typical personality, but if it meant that they would leave me alone, then I would be fine with pulling hair and throwing punches. None of the black-haired girls took me up on my offer, and of the 11 girls, one of the girls would talk to me sometimes. This morning, when I went into class, a group of the girls had taken out the nuts and bolts to my desk and the chair, so that when I sat down, both the desk and the chair collapsed, and I fell to the ground. Right away, I said, "You bitches," as I looked up at them, as they all laughed at me. I was so embarrassed that I stayed in the nurse's room the rest of the day, and the principal couldn't do anything because nobody fessed up to taking my desk apart. But me going home and telling my parents what happened in school started a horrible chain of events that made me regret ever telling my father anything. I didn't know this at the time, but my father was a member of the IRA in Ireland. He was actually one of the top leaders who had to flee the island for his own safety, and when he came to Valencia, it wasn't really for business, but just a way to escape and hide. So, like clockwork, the town of Valencia turned into Afghanistan overnight. There was a gas leak explosion the first night. Then the second night, one of the girls' houses had an electrical shortage that caused a fire. The following week, one of the girls' parents' cars' brakes malfunctioned while they were driving on the highway. I remember reading the newspaper headline that the Centro de Estudios Garcia Broche Middle School, the dark shadow of unluckiness, continues as the Perez family is taken to the hospital in stable condition. My dad was just really mythological like that, and something inside of him was triggered to come out of retirement and go back to his old violent ways when he saw me crying and upset. When all of this was happening, I really had no idea that Dad was behind any of it, nor did my mother, as they would both read the newspaper each morning, and my mother would nearly be having a heart attack, thinking we might be the next unlucky victim. And I remember my dad, in his thick Irish accent voice, saying, "I wouldn't worry about it." Of the 11 girls, one of them was sort of my friend, and nothing happened to her or her family. And when all the smoke cleared and the dust settled, that's when I put the puzzle together that Dad was behind everything. Miraculously, nobody was killed or seriously hurt in any of the accidents, but there was a lot of monetary damages done. The girls were all humbled and they left me alone until the 11th grade dance came around a few years later, and all the boys showered me with attention, and all the nastiness started to show its face again. I really tried my hardest just to ignore them, and in a few instances I pulled a few of the girls to the side to try to talk to them, which I think only made things worse. So when the group of the 10 nasty girls had a party at one of their houses, and everyone from the class was invited but me, it started round 2 of the accidents. My dad was an intentionally quiet man who worked as an elevator repairman. He carried this demeanour because I think he was trying to lie low from the authorities in Ireland. One morning I confronted him what was going on in school, and for the first time I informed him that I was aware that he was responsible for the accidents that occurred years prior. At first he denied it, but eventually he didn't admit to the accidents, but he stopped denying it. In his thick Irish accent, Spanish voice, he said, "You're crazy." When I told him in my 17-year-old Spanish voice, "I want you to teach me how to cause those accidents," then I said, "Dad, you don't understand. These girls are so nasty to me because I'm different, because I look like you." He said, "No, it's not worth it." I started crying hysterically and said, "Daddy, Beatrice had a party and the whole school was invited but me, and all they do is talk about how much fun it was and how they were going to have another party at another girl's house." My dad's blue eyes went completely blank, like he was transitioning himself back into a IRA foot soldier. Then he said, "Beatrice was the girl." I responded, "Yes, Daddy." Then he said, I'll take care of it. I quickly responded, "No, Daddy, I want you to show me what I need to do to create an accident." He told me it takes years and years of shadowing and mentoring. If you really want to, you can come along and just watch. I responded, "Yes, Daddy, I would love that." Dad explained to me that what we were going to do is go after Beatrice's father, who owned a restaurant business. We were going to make it look like an intentional fire was set by him, where he was trying to collect insurance money, which would ruin his business and cause criminal charges. My dad knew the right and wrong ways on how to start fires, and he said we were going to do it the wrong way on the building materials, which won't fully combust. So at 2 a.m. in the morning, my dad took me down to the Casa Lucia restaurant, where he had another talent of knowing how to unlock doors. Once inside, he intentionally poured kerosene in different areas around stucco and cement, where he explained to me would later show obvious signs to investigators as evidence that someone tried to use an accelerant to start the fire. Then, before we left, he did start a fire on a carpet, knowing that it would burn quickly. Then he dialed the emergency number 112, and the fire company quickly arrived. The next day at school, everyone felt bad for Beatrice when the newspaper reported her father's restaurant fire, but 2 days later the sympathy changed to scorn when her father was charged with arson. It was really so great to see the humiliation on her face. She was feeling the exact same way I was feeling when everyone was talking about her party. Eventually the girls realised that me and my family were connected with all the accidents and insurance scams that were occurring, and they all included me in all of their parties and stopped bullying me. No one ever suspected my father's affiliation with Ireland's IRA, and they thought it had to do more with my mother's side and possible connections with the Spanish Revolution. The girls in school learned tolerance. I learned that my dad is one bad man, and the people of Valencia learned whose daughter you shouldn't mess with. Please use caution if someone offers you a free trip to the United States to get the COVID vaccine. Posted by MTP6921. My older male friend that I chat with on Reddit promised me that if I came to Philadelphia from Spain, he would be able to get me the single dose Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. My dad told me to use caution because I really didn't know this guy, but he offered to pay for my plane ticket, hotel and everything else. So I figured as long as I stayed in public places and didn't allow him in my hotel room, then I would be fine. I cautiously agreed to take the 12-hour flight from Barcelona to Newark, New Jersey, where he would pick me up with his family, then take me on an additional 2-hour car ride to Philadelphia. The car ride would be a little scary, but I knew that there would be some risks involved with this trip. The following Friday, which was March 12th, I boarded the plane and I was on my way to New Jersey. I have never been to the United States, so I was really excited to do a little sightseeing. I speak and write English fluently, so I'm not concerned about the language barrier. My only real concern was the guy who I never met in person, who told me his name was Joe and was married with a daughter. Apparently him and his wife have an agreement where it's okay for him to flirt with my 25-year-old self online. The 12-hour red-eye flight was long and uncomfortable, as to be expected, but I started to get nervous about the whole ordeal once I got off the plane. He told me that him, his wife and daughter would meet me at the baggage claim area. Miraculously, I was able to pick them out by the photo Joe sent me, and considering his odd nature of talking to me online while being married, he had a normal looking family. His wife looked like the Griswold wife from the Vacation series movies, and his 14-year-old daughter looked like Reese Witherspoon's daughter. Joe kind of reminded me of Woody Harrelson in both his looks and his demeanour. Being from Spain, our country is inundated with American Hollywood culture, so I was thrilled to see as much as possible. I had learned from talking to Joe online that his wife Alison was a paediatric nurse at the children's hospital, who worked all the time, and their daughter Grace was born with a congenital polycystic kidney disease, so talking to me was a stress reliever for him, even though he tended to talk to me in a sexual manner at times. I didn't feel as concerned about the car ride once I met Joe's family. Alison explained to me that at the children's hospital they have people who don't show up for their daily COVID vaccines, so she could get me the vaccine any day I wanted, or else they would just discard the unused vaccine vials. Joe and Alison said that perhaps on the way back to Newark Airport, when I go back to Spain, they would show me around New York City, but they would be happy to show me Philadelphia today. So I took them up on their offer, and they showed me everything in Philadelphia, from the Liberty Bell to the Art Museum, where we ate dinner. I had a great time, and then Alison brought me over to the children's hospital, where I received the vaccine. I was beyond exhausted, especially after receiving the vaccine, and of course from the flight itself, so they took me to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Philadelphia. I was stunned on how beautiful the hotel was, compared to any other hotels that I have ever stayed at. Joe and his family were just so nice to me, which they attributed to their faith and the work they did in their church. I was so tired that I was going to pass out at any moment, and I was extremely grateful that Joe and Alison helped me carry my stuff to my room. I had planned on taking a shower, but once my head hit the pillow, I was completely knocked out. Eventually I woke up, and the bed was so comfortable that it felt like I slept forever. It was daytime out again, so I figured that I must have slept the whole night. Joe and his family were going to take me back to Newark Airport later tonight at around 4 p.m. I thought about possibly going to Washington DC today via the train, but I wasn't sure if I had enough time to do that. As I was about to brush my teeth, I realised that I forgot my toothbrush, so I headed down to the lobby, where the person at the front desk was more than willing to accommodate me. As I headed back to my room, something really peculiar had caught my eye. I had to do a double take when I looked at the newspaper because the date said Sunday, March 21st, and not Sunday, March 14th. I just stood there frozen, as I did every type of math calculation in my head, but I knew I left Spain on March 12th. Just to verify, I asked the clerk near the newspaper counter if today was really Sunday, March 21st, as the newspaper said, and she nodded her head yes. I had zero explanation, so I figured that I would go back to the room and get my cell phone. As I opened my phone, I was shocked to see that there was text messages sent from my phone on March 14th through early this morning, March 21st. As I read through the texts, they were mostly to my parents, saying that I was staying here until next week and I was having a great time, and that the phone calls would be really expensive, so to use text only. I've heard of people having amnesia before, so I couldn't rule that out. I just had no recollection of anything that happened for 7 days. The first thing I tried to do was call Joe, and right away I received a text back from him saying that he wouldn't be able to take me to the airport and that he arranged for an Uber to take me to the airport. Everything was so strange, and I was in a completely different country, but at least I still had my passport and all of my belongings that I came with. Out of curiosity, I went to the front desk, and they were able to show me that someone was using the key card to my room, where they were coming and going from March 14th through the 21st. The front desk clerk verified that I was the only one who was given a room key. All of this weirdness made me really tired, so I decided to just lay down until my Uber would arrive at 4 p.m. I set my phone's alarm clock for 3 p.m. and sure enough, the alarm clock was what woke me up. I gathered all of my things and headed to the lobby and waited until 4 p.m. for the Uber to arrive. During the car ride, I figured I would reach out to Joe once I got to Spain and see what we did, if anything, for that week, where I had zero recollection of what happened. The Uber ride and cruddy Newark airport were fine. The 12-hour plane ride to Spain was uneventful, besides the excruciating back pain that I attributed to sitting for too long. My parents picked me up at Barcelona airport, and I didn't want to worry them, so I just told them I had a great time and that I was tired, so I didn't want to tell them about the trip. In reality, I had no idea what happened in the unaccounted week's time. Maybe I went to New York, or maybe I just stayed in the hotel. When my parents dropped me off at my apartment, I messaged Joe on Reddit and he didn't respond right away, so I just waited for a while. After several hours, I started to get a feeling that something wasn't right, because he had chatted with me online every day for months, and this was not like him to respond to me. Once again, I fell asleep from exhaustion and jet lag, and I eventually woke up and took a warm bath. It felt like the best bath I had ever taken. As I got up to dry myself off, I noticed I had 2 scars located on the right side of my body, above my pelvic area. They were both about the size of a quarter and really didn't hurt unless I put a considerable amount of force and pressure against the scarred area. The further I looked at the 2 wound areas, the more I was convinced that they looked like they were stitched up by a professional. Went to the Barcelona City Hospital, and eventually I met with a nephrologist who sat me down and told me that someone had used great precision to laparoscopically remove my right kidney, and that he was really impressed on how small the wound sutures were. I sat looking at the nephrologist, completely stunned when he told me the news, because had I thought I went to the United States to get the COVID vaccine, but instead Joe must have got someone to remove my kidney for his daughter, and they must have done the laparoscopic surgery in the hotel room, since Joe never returned any of my messages on Reddit and his cell phone number was disconnected. I called the children's hospital, who confirmed that someone had made an appointment for me, Veronica Gomez, but Alison didn't work at the children's hospital and they had no idea who I was talking about. The hotel did little to help me because they didn't want the bad publicity, and unless if I come back to the United States to make a formal statement with the Philadelphia Police Department, they weren't going to help me either. From the online research I did and talking to the nephrologist, I would be fine with just one kidney, but it will be a long time before I chat with anyone on Reddit again. Please talk to your kids about their school buses when you have to work. Posted by MTP6921. Mommy had to go to work today and she couldn't wait for me to get on the school bus first before she left for work. The bus comes every morning around 7:47 AM. And before she left, Mommy did my hair in a ponytail, made sure I had my mask on, made sure I was wearing my school bag and that I had my jacket on. Mrs. Lauren is my driver and she is very nice. My friend Lauren and I are in the 5th grade and we ride the same bus together. Mommy told me to lock the door when I leave, where I just have to turn the thingy on the doorknob up. I live on a busy road and I could see if the bus is coming from the door window in my kitchen. I hear car after car whiz by, but I don't see the bus yet. I look at the clock on the oven and I see that it's 7:47, so I know it will be here at any time. I don't want to wait outside because once I leave the house, I know the house will then be locked. So if the bus doesn't come, then I'll freeze to death outside all day waiting for Mummy to come home. In the distance I see a bus start to come. Mummy says she can see about a quarter mile from our kitchen door window. The bus puts its lights on to stop, so I know the bus is going to stop at my house. I get excited a little bit knowing that I have to hurry or else I'll miss the bus. So I pull my backpack straps close together towards my chest and open the door. I lock the door and walk quickly towards my driveway. As I get to my driveway, I look at the bus and it's long and yellow like a typical bus, but this one has no number on it and my bus has a number 108 on it. And there is a man driving this bus instead of Ms. Lauren. I don't know what to do, so with my mask on, I look and stare at the bus. The driver opens the door and says, "Come on in." I just stare at him and freeze, because I've never been on a bus that didn't have a number on it, and Ms. Lauren has been my driver every day for the whole year. The bus driver says, "I can't wait here all day," as I stand there in the same spot. I really don't know what to do. My mummy never told me what to do in a situation like this. I start to look around and shake. I see that more and more cars are now behind the bus. I look up into the bus and there are no kids on there. I think to myself, there are usually plenty of kids on the bus. Before I get on, this bus has none. I know Lauren is usually on the bus as well as Ashley, Riley and Hayley, but sometimes they also get rides to school. I just don't know what to do. The driver says, "Come on sweetheart, get on." He looks a little weird. He has long stringy brown hair and has sunglasses on with a mustache. For some reason the bus just looks different. I know it's not my bus, but it just doesn't seem like the school bus I typically get on. I notice that the seats in the front that I can see just look different. They are a different colour and a different size. The colour of this bus is also a little different. It looks yellow, like the mustard that Mummy puts on her hot dog. My regular school bus has a darker yellow, which looks like the mustard they give us in the cafeteria. The cars behind the bus start to beep their horn, and I can tell the driver is getting angrier and nervous, and says, "You have to get on now." I respond, "Where's my driver?" He responds, "Your driver couldn't make it today, get on." Mummy told me that I have a gift that she had when she was born. We both test really well. Mummy said they put her in the 6th grade and skipped the 5th, and that they are thinking about putting me in a special school for smart kids next year. Mummy said she had made some bad choices when she was a teenager, but the both of us were a special kind of smart. So it was natural for me to ask questions to this bus driver, like, "What is my bus driver's name?" The male bus driver looked at me this time and he wasn't that nice. He said, "I don't know your freaking bus driver's name, but I will tell her that you were bad tomorrow if you don't get on the bus now." Something just didn't seem right, and I knew it. I didn't want to wait outside all day, but this man was scary. I was still shaking and I didn't know what to do. I remembered this morning looking out of the door window and seeing no other buses drive by, which was weird because the busy road I live on usually makes me constantly look to make sure that it's not my bus driving past my house. But why would there be no buses this morning? Is there no school today? Or did I just miss the buses drive by today? I just didn't know what to do. I really wish I was allowed to have a phone. My school doesn't allow us to have phones, so I had to leave it in the house. I continued to stand there in the cold weather and shake. I couldn't help it, so I started to cry. Mummy had to start her car this morning to get the ice off her windows, so I know it's really cold out. The bus driver then stood up from his seat and yells, "This is your last warning. Get on the bus right now." As he yelled that to me, I had this quick thought go through my head. It kind of just triggered a memory in my head. I remembered being in Walmart getting groceries a couple of days ago, and this man who looked like this same bus driver was always around me and Mummy, no matter what aisle we went down. I remember him because of the long brown stringy hair. He kept on smiling at me when I was at Walmart, and I didn't like it. I tried to stay as close to Mummy as possible. Then, when we went to go pay, he was right behind us as well, and in the parking lot, when we were leaving, he was there again. Now, I know this is the same man. As he is looking at me angry, I say to him, "What is my school bus number?" I could barely make out the sentence because I'm crying and shaking. He says, "Oh, I don't know." I then say, "You're a bad person, go away now." as I continue to cry. He says, "Oh no, I'm not. Come on, sweetie, get on the bus." At this time there seems to be 100 cars behind the bus, beeping louder and louder. I can see the car behind the bus has its window down, so the bus driver makes a move towards the step of the bus. I yell out, "Help!" as I continue to cry. The driver quickly assesses the situation, like he is thinking to himself, is it worth it for him to get off the bus? Then he quickly turns and sits on the driver's seat and pulls away without closing the door. I stand there in the same spot, crying as car after car drive by me. Maybe the cars think I got sick and don't want to go to school today. I think to myself, I really just don't know what to do, and it's really cold out. I look back and forth on the road as I don't see the bus anymore, and I hope he doesn't come back. I walk towards my house door, and the door is locked, and as I expected. And I say, "Oh, come on." Because of the busy road, we don't have any neighbours, and there is no sidewalk. I'm still shaking and crying, and I don't want that bus to come back. I try to move around to stay warm, and I don't like it that the cars can see me as they drive by. I don't have any gloves, so my fingers and my face are freezing. I'm still crying and shaking. I continually look both ways on the road to make sure the bus doesn't come back. I really just don't know what to do. I think about breaking a window to the house, but I don't want Mummy to get mad at me. It feels like the weather just gets colder and colder. I don't wear a watch anymore because Brian is annoying in class and always asks me what time it is, and Mummy just says it's probably because he likes me. I'm tired of carrying my school bag, so I take it off as well as my mask. My face is all wet from breathing into the mask, which makes my face feel even colder. I really don't know what to do because it's really cold. I take out my lunch from a school bag and I see that my plastic water bottle is half frozen. I just really don't know what to do, and I feel like I'm just going to sit down next to my front door. I can't even keep my eyes open, it's so cold, but I have to make sure that the bus driver doesn't come back. As I plop myself on the ground next to the door and I put both my hands on my hair, I hear a sound that sounds like tires and gravel moving. I say, "Oh no," as I hear a car pull into my driveway. I'm just too scared and cold to look up. I can't run. My muscles are just too cold. I hear the car park as I continue to cry. The car door quickly opens and someone quickly gets out. I hear my crying and the footsteps get closer and closer towards me. I say out loud, "No, go away from me, go away, no, help." I'm too scared to pick my head up. The footsteps get closer and closer, and I'm now crying more and more. Then I hear, "Baby, I'm so sorry, school was cancelled today because of the cold weather." I drove home as quickly as possible when I heard. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. If you like this content, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. And if you have a scary story you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.